November 2006 is a month that I will never forget. It's the month that my brother was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Luckily, his sentence was suspended. However, he was then sentenced to the Fort Des Moines. I will never forget sitting in the courtroom by my sister and by my sister-in-law, crying, scared to death that my brother, even though he's 8 years older than me, he was totally an adult at the time, was going to potentially be going to prison. I was also scared because of my nephew, who was going to be without his dad, who he had always known and had always had be a part of his world. Everything was going to be shaken for him, and he was only 6 at the time, which I can't even imagine what goes through a 6-year-old's head when your dad is all of a sudden taken away, especially when you're in the car, when he's pulled over and the police take your dad into custody. You go to the police station with the police officer because your dad was driving under the influence. I certainly don't condone my brother's behavior. I don't condone driving while intoxicated, but I just can't imagine how scary that was for him. And for my sister-in-law, when she got a phone call, having to come pick her son up from the police station. My family is white. I have no doubt that that played into the sentencing for my brother. I firmly believe that had he been a minority, that he likely would have been spending time in prison, probably not going to the fort. For my brother, this was technically his 4th OWI. He had been fortunate along the way to get some different breaks. His first OWI was converted to reckless driving, which he was immensely fortunate to have done. And then his second and third OWIs happened far enough apart that the court agreed to count his third OWI as a second. By the time he was really there, he really should have served time in prison. And I really believe that because of his race, that played into a part of why he didn't. The months that he was at the fort, we moved in with my sister-in-law and my nephew to help provide for them, to pay some of the bills. But without my brother being there, he is self-employed, he owns his own business, and so to take that income away definitely negatively affected my sister-in-law and my nephew. The other things that were really difficult for my brother was that he had to pay rent to live in the Fort Des Moines, which was about $500 to $600 a month. So on top of trying to help with bills at home, he had to make sure that every month he paid rent at the fort as well. And being someone who's self-employed and primarily working by yourself on projects, it's difficult to make sure that you're bringing in enough money to be able to do those things. On top of also having a curfew and having to work around specific hours, it was something that was really difficult. As far as whether or not the fort was effective for him, it was not. He had made up his mind that he didn't want to be there. He had made up his mind that he didn't need to work the steps to go through the process, to be sober, to do what he needed to do to be able to live a sober life once he was released from the fort. He certainly was compliant with the program and was successfully discharged. However, I can say now, 11 years later, it didn't stop him from drinking. He doesn't drink and drive anymore. However, he still drinks. It's still an issue. He did lose his license for 6 years, and for a period of time couldn't even get a work permit. So again, that had an impact on whether or not he was able to financially provide for his family. My sister-in-law had to not only get herself to and from work and my nephew to and from daycare, but also get my brother to and from jobs and get him back to the fort, explaining to a 6-year-old where his dad is at. And when I took him to visit his dad, approaching those huge buildings and being in just a confined space that's not designed for kids, not equipped for kids to play or run around, it was really difficult. I know how hard that time was for me, and I can't even imagine how things were for my nephew. Something that was effective for him was having a device in his vehicle that he had to blow in every time he started his vehicle. That's definitely a tool that I think is more effective than locking people up. One tool that was effective for my brother was having a device installed in his vehicle that he had to blow into every time he started his vehicle. It most certainly deterred him from driving while intoxicated or allowing anyone to drive his vehicle who was intoxicated. I actually had borrowed his vehicle a couple times because he had a truck, and so when I needed to move things, he was always my go-to. So I had experience with utilizing this lovely device as well. And not only do you have to blow into it when you start the vehicle, but then 15 minutes down the road, it beeps at you and you have to blow into it again, and it continually does that throughout your drive. So it's something that was definitely a deterrent, something that made a difference and that made a life change for him for the better. Whereas, like I said, being locked up, being confined away from his family was not something that was effective for him.